Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. Our purpose and passion are simple: to highlight the incredible nonprofits that make our communities stronger. Each episode is a chance for these organizations to tell their story in their words, sharing not just what they do, but why it matters to the people they serve, to their supporters, and to all of us who believe in the power of community. Through podcasting, we hope to amplify their voices, inspire connection, and give them one more tool to impact the hearts of donors, partners, and neighbors alike. This work is made possible through the generous support of our incredible partners: Cap Trust, offering fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations; Western Health Advantage, a local not-for-profit health plan that believes healthcare is more than coverage. It's about caring. CORE, executive leadership and comprehensive support services. They work in it so you can work on it. And Five Star Bank, a local, trusted advisor to community nonprofits for over 25 years. In this episode, I'm talking with Elena Delacey and Marshall Gorham of the American River Conservancy to explore what it really means to protect land, not just for today, but forever. We get into the scale of their work, over 31,000 acres preserved, and the responsibility that comes with it, from forest restoration and wildfire prevention to safeguarding the rivers and watersheds that so many of our communities depend on. What stood out to me in this conversation is that the conversation doesn't stop when the land is acquired. In many ways, that's just the beginning. Nothing is a quick-turn project. This is a conversation about stewardship, about legacy, about the critical role local organizations play in protecting the places we often take for granted. If you care about the future of our environment, if you want to understand land conservancy a little better, you'll appreciate this conversation. Elena Delacey and Marshall Gorham, welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice to meet you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
31,000 acres, land acquisition, ecological forestry, and forest restoration, and so much more we're going to get into. But before we get there, would you please explain what a land conservancy is? I'm going to bet that many of the people listening don't know. They don't understand.
Yeah, I can take a shot at that, and Marshall can fill in the gaps. But a land trust or a land conservancy is a nonprofit organization that works with willing sellers of land to protect any number of resources. So it could be biological resources, cultural resources, agricultural resources for public benefit. And we do that through a number of ways. So we can acquire fee title land, we can acquire conservation easements, we can accept donations of both. But the real focus is preserving land forever for public benefit.
Yeah, and I think to just kind of add into that, I like to think of conservancies as sort of this like conservation land protection middleman a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so as Elena had mentioned, we are a nonprofit, and yet we work extensively with local, state, federal government agencies that have missions to protect land and provide access to land and educate people about the importance of conservation and stewardship. And a lot of times, those government organizations, right, they have a hard time of getting that work on the ground, right? They're inherently, they're government agencies, right? They don't know the people. They don't live with the people. They don't actually represent, aren't directly representative of these different areas. And so, right, so for American River Conservancy, we work largely in El Dorado County, Upper American and Upper Cosumnes River watersheds. And everyone who works at ARC, we live, we recreate, we love living where we live. And so, right, we are kind of an extension. We like to, I'm not going to claim we're an extension of everyone, but we somewhat are. And we are able to tap into those government agencies. We get grants to support all of these efforts and kind of this overall mission, as Elena alluded to, of conservation, of caring for land stewardship and educating people as to why that's critical part of our lives.
Well, and I'm smiling as you're explaining the fact that you all recreate there, you live there, you use the environment the way it was meant to be used, because your website's one of the few websites, when I look at all your staff, they all look like they're in the environment of what they're protecting. Somebody's backpacking, somebody's on a mountain bike, somebody's climbing a trail.
Right.
And obviously in many other cases with some of the nonprofits we work with, that couldn't be the case.
Sure.
They certainly wouldn't want to be in this situation, but yours is all integrated. And it's like, okay, everybody's living it.
Yeah.
They really are concerned about what's happening in that space.
Yeah.
No posers.
No, right? Let me take this a step further in the detail of what you do, because you did mention it just a little bit in terms of conservation versus land stewardship. What is the difference? How do they vary?
Yeah. So conservation really is a broader term for how we protect land. In conservation, I think of it more as an umbrella term that can include stewardship, right? So conservation, a lot of times in land trust circles, can mean the acquisition part of protecting land, which is, working with the landowner, raising the funds, doing the due diligence to acquire a piece of property. But the conservation piece doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop with the acquisition, because land trusts and land conservation organizations are the only sector in the nonprofit world that promises to do something forever. And that's where the stewardship piece comes in. So stewardship really does mean we have an obligation, sometimes a legal obligation, sometimes a moral obligation, to take care of this land forever, to whatever that means, whether it's, creating public access for trails, whether it's, restoring a certain type of habitat back to its original state, or it's doing ecological forest management to make sure that we're creating a more resilient ecosystem, especially in areas where there might be houses or residential areas nearby. We want to make sure that we're being good stewards of the land, that we're being good neighbors. And so it's that stewardship piece really is the hard work of forever. When we talk about land trusts, it's
key stress, hard work.
It's the gritty
Literally.
work.
It's patching fences and repairing eroded roads and picking up trash.
So you're a homeowner, and many people who are listening may be landowners. Maybe they own an acre, or maybe they own 10 acres. Imagine owning 15,000 acres and how much work that takes. And no, we're not going out and visiting every single square foot of land every year, but there's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of miles of fencing to be repaired, or signage that goes down, or roads that need to be fixed when there's a big storm. So it's a big responsibility, and we take that pretty seriously.
And you didn't mention even the fire prevention elements of it all, which you are certainly in a fire-prone area, which requires a lot of maintenance, I'm sure, and work just to mitigate the possibility.
Yes, absolutely. Since about 2014, 2015, the King Fire was one of the first kind of mega fires, and that happened right in our backyard in the Upper American River watershed, the South Fork American River, and the Rubicon watershed. And so we saw the impacts of the King Fire, and we immediately started kind of putting our heads together with partners. We had been working on a project to acquire 10,000 acres at the headwaters of the Middle Fork American River. This is actually in Placer County, and we call it the American River Headwaters. Great name. But just adjacent to French Meadows Reservoir, major water source for Placer County, also right next to Granite Chief Wilderness. And so our plan was to acquire this 10,000 acre private in-holding from, it was a logging company that had previously owned it and managed it. And our goal was to create to create a bigger wilderness area there. And we also thought, well, we need to manage these lands. They've been managed poorly for the last few decades, we can do better. And so we worked with a group of partners called the French Meadows Partnership to not only manage those 10,000 acres, but expand the footprint of the project to include a total of 26,000 acres where we would do ecological forest management. That means mastication, coming in and doing hand thinning with crews, but then also reintroducing fire to the landscape. Because what happened with the King Fire was that fire in some areas burned so hot and so severe that we had landslides, and then we had, sediment going into the rivers, and then eventually into the reservoirs that are providing water for our communities, that are hydropower facilities for our communities, and that's huge. That's a huge impact for us, in billions probably of dollars throughout the state in repairs and dredging reservoirs, and so you have to get in front of the problem. And so that's what the French Meadows or American River Headwaters project was set out to do. And now we're 11 years on, and we've completed our first wave of forest management, and we'll have to do much more. It never ends. Trees keep growing, right?
Yes. Thankfully.
Thankfully and unfortunately.
Yes, right.
Depends on the context.
We love trees, but there were just too many up there. It's a legacy of, forest management practices that favored taking the larger, older trees, right? So some clear cutting, as well as exclusion of fire in those landscapes, which, as we all know now, was a mistake. And so it's 150 years of forest management practices. It's not going to be solved in 10 years, right? We have a lot to learn still as a society and as a community on how we can better manage those forests.
You just clearly described something that is, I think, so valuable for everybody to understand. Is it's a cascade of everything. So if, in fact, that fire hits, then you have the soil erosion. You get rain, all of it flows into the river takes it into the reservoir is feeding the electrical output, something gets clogged, it needs to be dredged. I mean, just what a catastrophic situation it is, beside or beyond just what we see as the burned timber. It's so much more. I didn't follow it all the way through to think, all these pieces happen every step along the way. And it's not even to mention the wildlife.
Right.
And what happens there versus the ability for them to move and or perish.
Yeah.
And I think what's hard with that is we are just individuals sitting here, and these are things happening on scales that are like so inconceivable, and unless you directly work in it every day is for your life. And so that's one of the most inherent challenges to the work we do is how do you make that feel visceral? How do you portray? How do you get these messages across? Right? And it is. This is all the foundation of where we live, and but it's so much bigger than all of us.
Right, and it is hard in the valley. If we don't see it, we don't necessarily understand it. It just happened.
Yeah.
But you're in it.
Yep.
And when you start talking thousands of acres and tens of thousands
and
of
even
acres.
Hundreds of thousands of acres.
Right. We're into miles in terms of what that looks like. So that was very helpful.
Yeah.
How about programs and projects and education? Because that's the other part of what you do. Where do you see the majority of, let's say, awareness and emphasis from the communities at large?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, and I think it's one of the things that makes us unique as a land trust is that we do have a very robust education program. We like to say that our programs touch over 2,000 people in every year, but I think that's direct impacts, right? Like our education and outreach probably affects or benefits more than that, because not only are we doing direct programs to schools and individual families and people who come out on hikes with us, but we're also out there doing water quality monitoring, which is this little blend of stewardship, right, taking care of the land, but also it's a part of a community participatory science program that is educating people about their watershed. And so, this particular program that I'm talking about on the Casumnes River, which is one of the two rivers that we focus on, is really about establishing community and establishing a sense of ownership, and this ethic of stewardship in the watershed. And if people are involved in taking water samples and measuring the alkalinity or measuring the pH of the water that is in their backyard or the water that comes out of their faucet, they're going to have this feeling of, oh, I care about that. It's this connection, and that is how you build a community that cares about, the environment, cares about nature, and not only that, but realizes that we are an inherent part of nature. We're not separate from it. And so that's really what we're trying to do with our education programs, is instill that environmental literacy in people so that they can then talk to their neighbors, talk to their family, and say, oh, I went out to the river last week. I saw an otter. It's so cool. Did you even know that was in our backyard? And it's just this excitement and this connection, I think, that we inspire.
All of those things are so important. And the engagement for the community, the people who are not necessarily aware it's so close.
Yeah.
Is 30 minutes up the road if you're coming from Sacramento to just head east, to really experience all these things that are so critical to the infrastructure of existence that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Tell me about where most of your time is spent. I mean, I can imagine just what you've just said. It could be forever just rolling fence. I mean, there's so much out there, or, cleaning the forests and trimming and pruning and planting and cutting.
Yeah. Well, I think for us as an organization, and Marshall can maybe speak to his position a little bit more, but looking at us as a whole, as an organization, if just purely looking at the numbers, I'm thinking of our annual report from 2024, about 60 to 70% of our expenses were on stewardship, on land stewardship. So taking care of that land, whether it's doing forest management or getting out there and fixing fences, or, mowing star thistle, or doing water quality monitoring, right? There's any number of activities that stewardship encompasses. We also have to monitor and set foot on each one of our properties at least once a year. So that takes a lot of staff time as well. So on a whole, most of our energy expenses are going towards that care, that long-term care in perpetuity of the land. But, the remainder of it is on land acquisition, and then there's education programs, and then there's just the overall running of an organization, right? Like that is a part of what we do, and every single nonprofit organization has admin.
Yes. Please give us unrestricted funds.
We got to keep the lights on. We got to pay property taxes. We have to pay our insurance, so those things are also a part of what we do. But I would say overall, vast majority of our time and resources are going towards stewardship.
Yeah. I think it's fun. Elena's sort of alluding to the admin, and, I think both of us would like to think that, our days were spent just frolicking through fields and, looking for ring-tailed cats and stuff. Right. But unfortunately, yes, we are behind. We're probably both behind a computer far more than we wish we were. But I do think it's right. We as an organization, right, we are connected to the land. So I do think it's so interesting, like the seasonality of work as well. And so I'm just thinking of, our other staff with stewardship. Right, we've had this meadow restoration project that's up in the headwaters of the Casumnes River, right? So from June through August, our stewardship staff are pretty much just up there doing meadow restoration, right? Right now, through the winter time, we've alluded to a lot of fuel reduction work we've done. Our forest restoration team has been burning thousands of piles to burn off, to minimize everything that's been compiled out there, because this is the time to do that, right? There's a very tight window to do that. And then I just think of like our education staff, for instance, right? We're in peak school season, right? So we've got field trips, and then come summertime, there'll be nature camp, and then they'll be out every day for summertime, cooking in the sun, hanging out by the river with kids, slapping on sunscreen every day onto themselves and everyone else. So yeah, I think if you were to, I can't speak on behalf of everyone with our staff, but there's a fun, there's more dynamics, I think, to the work, which make it interesting.
And I'm so glad you did that, because I think people can get caught up in the conservancy part of it. Oh, it's just a land acquisition thing and they just manage this property. They don't really understand that there's an actively engaged element of the population that's up there enjoying it and experiencing and using it too, to the degree that they can, and it's available, and you have everything up there. Every trail you can think of, and parks and recreation areas and waterways, and cycling and off-roading and kayaking and river rafting. It just everything the outdoors is all about, especially when you think of Northern California.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's all there. What about collaboration? You touched on it a little bit, and you are the master collaborator, because you have to touch and work with so many different entities. Yeah. You've got government entities and state and federal and private landowners as collaborators, because you have to work with them, and then you're working with nonprofits who are bringing children up from the from the various surrounding cities. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, well, I'll actually let Marshall speak to collaboration with landowners. That's a big part of what he does in his work.
Yeah, so you're right. We sort of conservation, stewardship, education, right? It's hilarious. We have these like massive pillars of our organization, and they, in their own sense, are their own departments, but within each one of those departments is like one or two people, right? And it's just amazing then the different partnerships that come along with each one of those emphases. And so I will just say, in my line of work, first and foremost, as a conservancy, as a land trust protecting land, we only work with willing landowners. And so the foundation of those 31,000 acres that we've protected over our 36 years of existence, it all falls back on landowners within El Dorado County who have been interested, willing, and dedicated to seeing their land protected, right? Kind of, there is that altruistic element of, I own this land and it's bigger than just me. I want it to contribute to something bigger. Sure. So without willing sellers, without willing landowners, a conservancy cannot exist. Mm-hmm. That's the front end of it. And then the back end of it is, it would be great if all of those willing landowners were prepared to donate all of their land, but that's just not the reality of the world we live in. So we have to go find funding for all of these. And essentially it's all grant-funded projects.
And by funding, you mean so that you can purchase the land from the landowner.
Correct.
To continue to build a contiguous geographic area.
Exactly. Yeah, and so then that is tied to, I will say in El Dorado, as a relatively rural county, we don't have a lot of local resources to support projects that, most of our projects are on the scale of millions of dollars to buy and protect land. And so we have to go out to mostly state agencies. So Wildlife Conservation Board, Natural Resources Agency, Department of Conservation, Sierra Nevada Conservancy. These are kind of the big ones that we get funding from. I will just go ahead and throw out, we've secured a little over $100 million in our existence for acquisitions. Mm-hmm. And half of that has come from the Wildlife Conservation Board, just to give you kind of a landscape there. And so that is who we work with. And again, not mutually exclusive, have to have both. Otherwise, at least that conservation arm of ARC doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in terms of the stewardship side and the education side of things, our collaborators are a lot of state agencies that are, again, providing that funding, but also, I mean, it spans the spectrum of local government, so the county, all the way up to federal government. We're working right now with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They've provided some grant funding through their partners program to do some habitat enhancement and habitat restoration projects. We receive funding from the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, which is a federal agency to enhance working landscapes. And we're working with our local NRCS office on a project right now.
And I'm going to ask you on the acronyms, RCS and NRCS.
NRCS, so Natural Resources Conservation Service.
Okay.
I know there's so many.
You don't know the NRCS?
Yes.
You don't know NRCS?
No.
I mean, there's local schools. We have in El Dorado County, I don't know how many local school districts we have, but we have a lot of smaller school districts that are like 1 or 2 schools.
Sure, rural.
Very rural, but we have relationships. We've established relationships with some of those schools and teachers to get students out on the land and participate in some of these activities that we're doing. We collaborate with other nonprofits. So we collaborate with Placer Land Trust, who operates mostly in Placer County. They hold a conservation easement on one of the lands that we own because we had to form a partnership so we could get the funding. I alluded to French Meadows, the project that we did up there. That is a collaborative of several organizations and agencies, including the Nature Conservancy, Placer County Water Agency, Tahoe National Forest, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, and UC Merced. We're all coming together to steward this landscape. And also, some organizations have better resources and technical expertise in some areas than do others. American River Conservancy is a private landowner, and so we are able to get funding for our side of the project much easier and faster than, say, the Forest Service. They have a lot of more hoops to jump through. Mm-hmm. But Placer County Water Agency has a great media team, and so they can come out on our site tours and film and take photos. And so we work together as a collaborative and work to our strengths, and that's what I think really helps everybody to be successful. And that's just one example of one project where every single project that we work on, it's not just us. It's us plus WCB or the private landowner.
Wildlife Conservation Board.
Conservation Board. Yeah, we'll spell out the acronyms next time. And also I just wanted to mention that our board of directors and our local community is a huge part of that collaboration. We couldn't do what we do without our volunteers, our board, our community of supporters. Last year alone, I think about 40% of our revenue came from the community, so individual supporters.
We'll be back to learn more about some current projects with Elena Delacey and Marshall Gorham from the American River Conservancy, following these brief messages from the great businesses that see the value in supporting this program.
I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of 5 Star Bank. We're dedicated to supporting nonprofit organizations who advocate for the strength, resilience, and vitality of those they serve. When nonprofit organizations thrive, our community does too. By supporting the Nonprofit Podcast Network, 5 Star Bank is amplifying the voices and meaningful impact of our nonprofit community. We're 5 Star Bank, a trusted nonprofit partner. How can we help you?
We are really excited to be part of the family and contribute to the work that you all are doing. CORE provides fractional and interim executive services, along with comprehensive back-office solutions that go into our client sites and do the work to give them the capacity they need in order to move through transitions, whether that's planned or unplanned. Or companies also work with our accounting and finance, back-office solutions, human resources, technology, and administration. The reason why our back office solutions add value is because we save them time and money, anywhere from 20 to 30% of what they would spend on that back office solution. We work in it so they can actually work on it. CXORE.com and contact me directly at DTEAT@CXORE.com.
If you're interested in learning more about how CORE may help your organization, visit CXORE.com.
Hello, this is Scott Thomas with Cap Trust in our Sacramento office. I specialize in working with local nonprofits and associations. Annually, we survey private and public nonprofit organizations across the country to better understand challenges they see in today's environment. In our more recent survey, we heard concerns about proper board governance, mission-aligned investment, and how to implement alternative investments. If you would like a copy of the survey or to discuss your organization, look me up, Scott Thomas at captrust.com.
I'm thrilled to have Western Health Advantage partnering with us as they do so much to support so many nonprofit agencies in our community. As a truly local health plan, you'll find individual and family options, employer options, plans for CalPERS and Medicare Advantage. From medical services to pharmacy, health and wellness support, as well as behavioral health care, Western Health Advantage has a plan that fits what you need. As an employer, for profit or nonprofit business, individual or family, you can find more at westernhealth.com. On this collaborative turning to opportunity, turning to progress, you've been working on something that we talked about earlier for years and years and years, because you'd have to acquire the funding, go purchase, acquire the funding, go purchase. But I think it's close to coming to a close. And I want you to share that, because I know that has, I think short term, I mean, a year's a long term for me. It's like, oh my gosh. And I look at developers, these guys are buying property for 25 years from now.
Yes.
I cannot fathom that patience. And that's what this experience has been too. So why don't you share that? Because I know it's a big project for you. It's been going on for a long time, and you can see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, well, I'll kind of
Just a peep. We can
Just pinhole through the shoebox for like looking at the eclipse, right?
Yeah, just enough for us to
Yeah.
not have us curl up in a ball and cry at night. I'm kidding. I'm being over dramatic.
It takes persistence for sure, and lots of patience. And I'll kind of set the stage, and maybe Marshall can take it from there. But really, it's so you're alluding to Dorado Ranch, which is one of our kind of legacy projects that we've been working on really since 2011. And our previous executive director, Alan Ergott, was really instrumental in creating building these relationships, and kind of setting the stage for what we are now carrying on. And so our goal has been to acquire this 7,000-acre ranch. We call it Dorado Ranch. It's been called other things over the years, but essentially this whole entire ranch was at one point scheduled or slated to be developed into residential houses. So can you imagine? 7,000 acres, houses, probably not a subdivision like you would imagine, but more like ranchettes, and lots of roads and wells, developed wells for water. Lots of community members. This was the early 90s. They opposed it. They didn't want it to happen. They eventually were able to stop the development through a series of lawsuits. And, but the county had approved it. If it weren't for these community members, that development would have gone through. Fast forward a decade or two, another developer.
For me, that is an eternity. That's not a fast forward, but I understand. But when we're talking forests,
yes,
how long?
We're talking in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Go in perpetuity, correct?
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is on the Casumnes River. So the Casumnes River is the last undammed river on the western slope of the Sierra Nevada. So ecologically, it's a very important watershed. There's still wild salmon that run in that river. This is also a huge swath of blue oak woodland that has been it's been rangeland essentially for over 150 years. Before that, it was inhabited by the Nisenan people, Miwok people. And so this landscape is gorgeous. It's beautiful. So fast forward 20 years, the development had, gotten squashed by the community. Another developer comes along and purchases the land. And Angelo Sakopoulos is the developer that we're working with now to purchase the property. And so we've been working with him and his group for just over 12 years, really, to acquire the 7,000 acres in phases. And so far, we have acquired the first 4 phases, so just over 4,000 acres we currently hold in fee. So we acquired it outright. And we are now working on the last 2 phases, which phase 5A and 5B represents about 3,000 acres. So I'll let Marshall talk a little bit about that and kind of what the next steps are.
Sure. Yeah, so we're pushing right now to complete that 5A acquisition by the end of the year. The powers that be will let us do that. And then ideally 5B within the next 2 to 3 years or so. And then the goal from there is to transfer this entire property over to California Department of Fish and Wildlife, CDFW.
Yes.
To be managed as part of their state wildlife area system, which is over 1 million acres across the state, to be open for public recreation. But kind of that initial deal back 12 years ago was we had to acquire the whole thing before we could establish that. And in addition to that, we also needed ARC has another one of our responsibilities is to develop the public access infrastructure for it. And so while we are securing the millions and millions of dollars to purchase the land, we're also securing additional funds to build a parking lot and a trailhead and a trail so that the public can actually get out there and see a sweeping view of the Cosumnes River and the Sierra Foothill Blue Oak Woodland region. And when we talk about partners, kind of coming back to that, this is fun. Partnership is the funding component of it. So Wildlife Conservation Board, CAL FIRE, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, Natural Resources Agency, some funds from El Dorado County, and then for the public access component of it, kind of those same powers that be, as well as Impact 100 of Greater Sacramento, who very graciously donated an additional $100,000 to that project to help develop it and have that really important community element.
And not to minimize the way that you just phrased that, you actually had to earn that.
That's true.
And that was a competitive process
Yes.
that you went through. It was a vetting process. It was a whittling down or weaning down to the most worthy nonprofits, of which for that particular category you were successful last year. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I mean, $100,000 is significant when it's unrestricted.
Absolutely. That grant in particular is really great because it sort of allows us to fill in the gaps and it's a bit more adaptive. And I appreciate you bringing up the point in terms of having to earn it as well, because I should say, I alluded to earlier, we're sort of this middleman of like getting grants and implementing projects. But every single one of those grants that we secure, it is a competitive process. We are competing with other, similarly missioned land trusts and conservation organizations. Some of them far more resourced than we are, some of them less. And we have to write grant applications, and it is competitive. And we've. We do everything we can to develop the best projects we possibly can in the area where we work. But then there's that point where you have to submit the application, and it is a little bit to the whim of others, and you just kind of you hold your breath and hope you did the best job you could, or you did the best job you could.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is out of our control, and that is definitely a challenge for us. Again, kind of working in a rural area. Where we have to go to those state and federal sources because we just don't have as much available to us at a local level.
Let's talk just a little bit more about how you get the money to, for example, purchase these pieces of property.
Yeah. Well, it is a competitive process. There is finite dollars at the state level and the federal level for land acquisition.
More finite today than they've been.
Yes, absolutely. Getting people out on the land. So our funders, Wildlife Conservation Board, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, Natural Resources Agency. They're all staffed by people. And sometimes these people, live in Sacramento or they live in our region. So it's great to get them out on the land because, as you know, being out there there's nothing better than being out on a ranch with, freshly leafed out blue oak trees and wildflowers. A picture doesn't do it justice, right? So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of just building relationships. It's also about building relationships with our community and our community of supporters. So I said, over in 2025, just over $600,000 of our income was from private community members.
Which is so great to hear.
It's wonderful. We could not do what we do without that. And a lot of that funding is largely unrestricted. So we're able to, use that in areas that is most important for us. And a lot of the grant funding that we get, actually all of the grant funding we get from these various agencies is restricted. So we have to use it for what we say we're going to use it for, whether it's an acquisition, fair market value. We got to raise $5 million for this project. Every single dollar of those grants are going towards that purchase price.
So given that you have these tranches of money basically that come through, are those pass through? So that $5 million that you have to purchase just really goes through the organization. It's really not.
Yeah, it goes straight into an escrow account.
Yeah, it doesn't even come through our books.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the budget?
Our budget generally is around $2 million. Last year was, I think, around $2.4 million total, but it depending on what projects we have. And this is operational. This doesn't include the acquisition.
Understood.
But operational, and that includes our stewardship projects and all of that.
How many people do you employ?
We have 14 staff.
Okay.
Some are part-time, some are full-time, but yeah, it's 14.
So this is the fun question. You have an outdoors person who's so emphatic about nature and wildlife and preservation, conservation, stewardship, that loves what's happening. And they go, I want you to have everything I've got. It's a blank check, basically. What would it look like? What would you do with it?
Oh, that is such a good question. That is literally we were debating about this here, and I think my mind first goes to how can we leverage this? How can we leverage this funding to do more? And one of the things that we as an organization have been really striving towards, and it's kind of the stretch goal, is we'd like to create a fund that we can pull from to ensure that we're going to be able to sustainably manage all these lands. And so we can continue to do this land conservation work, do this acquisition work, so we can protect all these important areas. So my first thought was, we gotta fund this revolving fund that can keep growing and growing and growing and sustain our organization so we can do that work forever. And maybe set aside a little chunk for opportunities that come along, that say somebody wants to sell their land, but they got to sell it right away and we don't have time to wait for the grant funds to come through. Hey, we need that opportunity fund. We can use that and we can put that money to work. The other thing that Marshall mentioned was creating this protected area along the Casumnas River riparian corridor. Being able to protect that and create a trail along the river would be a dream. I mean, I think that is a vision for us as an organization to see that happen. That's like one of those 25, 30-year visions. When we talk about the South Fork American River, which is where American River Conservancy really has its genesis, is in the South Fork. That's the kind of vision that the founders of our organization had, was to see a river corridor protected with public access, with trails, and they did it We did it.
Mhm.
We created a network of trails along the South Fork American River with protected lands, and now hundreds of thousands of people, I'm sure, are recreating out there every year. They're riding their bikes, they're riding horses, they're hiking, they're paragliding, they're kayaking, And so I think we have that experience, and we have that that vision as an organization, and being able to transfer that to, say, the Casumnes River is real, and I think it can be accomplished. But again, it would take lots of investment, and I really hope that someone comes to us someday and says, hey, I want to give you my estate, and I want you to do whatever you want with it. Because, essentially that's what we would do. We would make sure that we can continue this work forever and make sure that these visions become reality.
Yeah, I did just want to add, kind of just to both of those two, in terms of the fund, to be able to kind of be more adaptable and be able to pivot when opportunities come up. It is important to stress that ARC, we are not the only land trust, and in fact, California alone has over 100 land trusts, and so that model of having this robust fund to be able to do the work is already a proven model, especially when you look at more resourced areas like the Bay Area. Essentially, you have land trusts out there who a property comes up for sale and they have $3 million to
grab it.
To grab it. The ability to be able to do that at the local level is just, that's a dream for us. And when you can handle it at that local level, you don't have to go compete at the state or even the federal level for grant funds. You can kind of form the community, the world that you want. So, so it's certainly something to aspire to. And I just wanted to get into the slightest nitty gritty on the trail vision. I just wanted to stress that with ARC's Genesis, it's that South Fork American River Trail. So for those who are familiar with our region, Salmon Falls out to the Cronin Ranch, Magnolia Ranch area, that whole stretch of the river. And there's an opportunity to really mirror that on the Casumnes. I would say even to a greater extent. There is a preserve in Sac County that's actually owned and managed by the Sacramento Valley Conservancy. It's called Deer Creek Hills. And there's a potential to connect that about 12 miles upriver to El Dorado Ranch. And so that's,
there we go.
Probably
So
more than a lifetime.
That's it. It's there. The vision is there.
Yeah. So Casumnes, the Casumnes River Wildlife Area. And I would say, and if that person comes along, you want us to name it after you, I think we'll do that.
Naming rights for it.
Absolutely.
A chunk of the forest is yours.
And I think it's really important that we as organizations have these bold visions, because that is really that imagination, that ability to see the future and what you want is really the first step in making it happen. And that's the future that we want to have for our children, for our grandchildren, and for everybody who comes after us. Because that's why we're here doing this work, is to create this world that we want to live in. So it's very rewarding to be able to dream up these things.
And I have to compliment both of you, because when I asked the question, you viscerally changed. It was a smile. It was, let me share. Yes,
Sure.
We know what we're going to do with it.
Oh, yeah.
That's what people want to hear.
Yeah.
Those bold visions. What does it look like in the future? Even though today we may not be able to have the means to make it happen, but at least we're working towards that goal, that objective that you shared. It's for the legacy of it. It's really for the better of the environment, our children, and so that we preserve it.
Yeah. And one thing we've touched a little bit on how the genesis of El Dorado Ranch was, it was tied to, there was development threat. And it is important. We haven't talked too much about the sort of the development trends of the greater Sacramento area, but when you look at kind of that Highway 50 corridor in between Sacramento and El Dorado County, the growth is moving southwards towards the Casumnes. So again, big vision, we try and be proactive as much as we can. And we really are kind of at a place where we do need to proactively start, and I would even say, aggressively start creating a buffer from the threat of development, because it can only go north and south, basically, from where it is right now. So I think that's just another important part of that vision.
And a great point the word was coming in my mind too, the buffer. We need to buffer the development opportunity because if it's conservancy land, it stops.
Yeah.
And that's as far as you can go. And then most people are really excited because they have a preserve behind their property.
Yeah.
And so
and it's not just
value.
It's not some massive sea of suburbia
Correct.
That's completely disconnected from the landscape that all those houses have been built on.
Right. So we have to come back to reality.
Please don't.
No, we don't. Let's just go to the forest and hang out. What does the organization see today as its greatest need?
I'll leave that to the director.
Yeah, I would say our greatest need really is this sustainable funding source for ongoing land management, ongoing operations and maintenance of these properties that we're entrusted with. We currently own 15,000 acres. We will be owning more than that into the future. And so setting us up for success is really that's my challenge. That's my stretch goal for the next 5 to 10 years, is creating an endowment, creating a forever fund is what we're calling it. And that will enable us as an organization to be solid financially, to be able to take care of these properties, to be able to weather the storms of unreliable funding, and be more self-sufficient as an organization. And I think that is really kind of what my biggest challenge is, and our biggest challenge. But it's also an opportunity for the organization to grow and to expand, to create a larger circle of supporters, and that's what it's going to take. So,
impact. When you identify impact, successful use of the funding that you get, is there a brief way you could say, just as a synopsis of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, impact for us, and we talk about measurable outcomes a lot in the nonprofit world, is, it can be measured by acres protected, miles of river protected. Those are big ones for us. But I think there's more of a kind of a quantitative, or less of a quantitative and more of a qualitative measurement of our success. And I think that has to do with our communities. How do our communities feel in terms of their connection to place? It relies on the environment as the basis. So that's our agricultural lands, our working landscapes. The recreational industry is hugely economically impactful for our region in terms of tourism. So those benefits, we're really kind of trying to hone in on what those benefits are of the work that we've been doing for the past 36 years, and I think we're moving towards that direction. And we've been having some exciting conversations with some folks at the county level about how to really boost that. How do we boost our rural economy in ways that aren't extractive, that are giving back to the community and individuals.
When I can certainly see, as your presence becomes more known, 36 years in the scheme of the way that we look at things for legacy is really not that long.
Yeah.
But now you've got a couple of generations of leadership that are starting to recognize, this is a force in our community.
Yeah.
And as you acquire more property, you become a bigger visual piece of the community. You become more impactful, more recognized, better understood.
Yeah.
We're a middle-aged parent
right
now.
Yes.
And as we know, middle-aged parents they're really good at doing some things, and then they have limited bandwidth for other things. And
it's about that point in time where you look and go, gosh, if I could have done that differently, I would have.
And as I say that, I'm feeling very reflective of myself.
Yes, easy to do. So as we look at what you guys do on a regular basis, day to day, you're in an environment that you actually enjoy. But you also carry the stress of concern for it, and it's an operation. It's a business. You still have the liabilities of a business that you have to deal with every day. Things change. How do you escape? Because for somebody like me, it's like, I can't wait to get out on a trail or go for a ride or paddle down a river. But you're in it all day long.
Yes.
What do you do to get away from it?
Yeah. Well, I am behind a desk probably 80% of the time, so I still go out in nature to de-stress. And part of that is always, when I'm going on a hike, it's always to a body of water, whether it's a waterfall or a creek or a stream. That water is very soothing and peaceful. So that's a big part of my routine.
Yeah, I think it's just funny. I would assume it would be strange for anyone who works in conservation that they didn't previously already like being outdoors, right? That's kind of why you get into it in the first place.
You certainly would think so, right?
Yeah, and then you consider yourself so lucky that you get paid to be outside in some way, or at least support the outdoors in some way. I just think it's just funny for me. I think of all the people I know who work in this career field, and I just find that the interests become far more niche, right? So what I just think is like, whereas right, someone who does not work in this world, you go on a hike and you might go on one that's more epic one day. You might go up into the high country, right? Or you might go out to Folsom Lake. But for us, we get a little weird, right? We're looking for that weird, peculiar thing. So you're going to find us at like a vernal pool preserve, right? Or we're out in the places that you need to look a little harder to see the beauty in it. And so, but with that, the reason that comes though is because you do work in it all day. So you have this awareness of more that's going on, and then I don't know. I feel like you're able to develop a deeper understanding and an appreciation for the smaller things and kind of the more off the wall stuff. So that's where I usually find myself trying to hunt down like a tricolored blackbird in the middle of the Central Valley, which is not where most people would. They'd go the other way, right? They'd go in the hills to go get away. So,
or looking in some vernal pool for some little tiny tadpole from gosh knows when. I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, look close. You got to look closer.
Right. Yeah. What's the best way to learn more about the organization?
Well, I think the best way to learn more about us is to get involved in one of our programs and come on out on a hike or a tour or one of our workshops that we offer. If you can't do that, you can sign up for our e-newsletter on our website. You go to our website and scroll all the way to the bottom, and you can put your email address in, and we'll send you regular emails about what's going on. And of course, if you want to become a member, you can do that as well, and you can get a quarterly newsletter mailed out to you. But there's any number of ways. You can also get to know us really well on social media. Marshall over here posts a lot.
You can see me on there.
Our social media content. And
looking for that exclusive something in a vernal pool or
yeah. Unfortunately, the vernal pools we don't have vernal pools in our area of influence, but it's looking for the other things.
Yeah, I mean, we just posted a video of a ringtail cat.
Yes, we did.
You mentioned that earlier.
On one of the properties that we're hoping to protect soon, and so yeah, I mean that Instagram, Facebook, online, our web presence is there, but really, you got to get out on the land with us. That's the best way.
And I would just stress that I think one thing that's really fun about our organization is there are so many ways to get involved, and whether you're a person who you like to be around other people or you don't like to be around other people at all, like we can find
there's something
there's some way you can help us. So I like that, because obviously we don't all get involved in the same way and we don't have the same interests. So we're pretty good at finding something. Yeah. We can find something for you.
And the best way to engage either a volunteer or a donor or whatever isn't just the superficial, here's something for you, I'll give, whatever it may be. It's to have them participate.
Oh, absolutely.
Once they participate, now they're a part of your organization. Now they want to talk about it and share the experience. And if they have the means, you share the means. But that's so easy to do when you think about the fact that just walk outside.
Yeah.
It's there for you.
Yeah.
Literally, one of the responsibilities, we have a land stewards program, and the way you can give back is to just help us go visit some of our properties and be extra eyes and ears and let us know when things are going on.
Back to the beginning, is the fence up?
So, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what we did
After a
today.
storm came through, absolutely. That's a huge help
Right.
to us. Yeah.
And we will put the website in the show notes so it's easy for somebody to just grab a link and
Great.
find out a little bit more. Marshall, Elena, thank you for protecting not just our land, but the legacy. And, this has certainly been one of the more tutorial episodes for me as well, because I'm not that versed in Conservancy. Just superficially, I kind of know what it's about. But what you've shared today demonstrates the need for organizations like yours and what you and your team are doing to protect all this natural land, this natural preserve, the wildlife, everything that comes with it. I think now we understand a little bit more the significance of it and the value that it represents to our communities, because if it fails, it's much more catastrophic than just a piece of development taking over a piece of land. So for what you do, for what you and your team do in allowing us to be able to enjoy that space up in El Dorado County, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. It's our pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. We hope today's episode inspired you and gave you a deeper look into the work of our local nonprofits. If you believe in our mission to amplify their voices, please take a moment to leave us a positive review and share this episode with a friend. It helps more people discover the incredible work happening in our community. And don't miss future episodes. Subscribe to our weekly updates and monthly newsletter at nonprofpod.com. And if you're part of a nonprofit that would like to be featured, we'd love to hear from you. Just visit the Guests tab on our website. The Nonprofit Podcast Network is recorded and produced at Hear Me Now Studio with generous support from our outstanding partners. CapTrust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations. Online at captrust.com. Western Health Advantage, local care with community impact. Find the plan that fits at westernhealth.com. CORE, executive leadership and comprehensive support services. Visit cxore.com. And 5 Star Bank, a local trusted advisor to community nonprofits for over 25 years. 5starbank.com.